Good morning, everyone. I will just talk in a brief about this just-in-time compiler. So, I think already we know about this machine language. See here in the first slide that A, B, C, and what is C. When we'll find A plus B, C, this is the machine level language that is in the form of zeros and ones that we human cannot understand. Only machine can understand. Usman, Mr. Luck? Okay. So generally in C, I think we have seen that C, the compiler translates that source file, that is the high level language that we humans can understand, into the object file. Okay, that machine can understand. This is the object file that machine can understand. I think in the C compiler we have seen that. Usman, go right. Usman, scroll up. Scroll down, Usman. Third page. Okay. So I think here we can see, just like, let's suppose I have written it is there is a C program, x equal to 10, y equal to 20, and display z. Okay, so when the compiler will translate this, it becomes a surprise for z. So it will give an error. I think it reads display z, the letter as z comes as surprise. So it will give a error. It was in C language, C compiler. So if you scroll down, okay, here it shows that it is an error, it is a bug. Okay, so one word. Okay, now we will come into this Java compiler. What happens? I think this is the bytecode, that is the intermediate code. I think this is the source file, x equal to 10, y equal to 20, whatever the program that we have written. And one thing you can notice here, we have written display the function z 3 times here. Now, what this Java compiler will do, it will translate this source file into the intermediate code, that is the bytecode. Okay, but this bytecode is not understandable by our machine. So what will happen? The JVM, Java Virtual Machine. Usman, go ahead. Now you can see here the Java Virtual Machine can understand this bytecode, and a loader. I think you can see there the loader is there. So loader will translate that. The interpreter is there. It will translate that into the machine level language which machine can understand. Now, what happened? I will just not tell about the just-in-time compilation. Earlier, the approach was that it was line-by-line execution. Means you can see that x equal to 10. So earlier, what used to happen? The byte code, the intermediate code of x equal to 10 happened. Then it go into execution. Then y equal to 20, it got changed into intermediate code. Then go into execution. So like this. Now I told you that to observe 3 lines same, display Z, display Z, display Z. Now, let's suppose if there will be 1,000 lines of this same code, display function Z. Now, the compiler will run 1,000 times to convert that into the intermediate code and then into the this machine level language. So it will cost a lot. Time is very important. So what happens in just-in-time compilation? This it will the just-in-time compilation approach. What will happen? Osman, take up. Wait means scroll down, scroll down, scroll down. Yeah. Initially, I think here the same thing which I have told you. Initially, Java people used a straightforward approach in JVM for converting the byte code into the machine level language and then running it on the computer. Same thing, line by line execution. Usman, go down. Usman, go down. Next page. Okay. Take up little bit above. Yeah, yeah. Take up, take up. Okay, you can see here observation 1, same thing. So if it will repeatedly same line of code, if it will go 1,000 times, then we can understand here that it will cost a lot. So what it will do just in time compilation, if it will already read that, let's suppose display z function, if it is 1,000 line code, same thing, what it will do, it will convert that line into the byte code, and it will keep that in the memory. So next time when it will come into the picture same line of code, then it will not convert that into byte code and use the same byte code for that. So it reduces our time. That is the just in time compilation. Means, Usman, go over down. Yeah, same thing. This is the last slide. One second. So here, same thing. So what will happen? Observation 1, you can see. So a JVM convert byte code for all such critical portions into the machine language form just once and use the already converted code next time. Means it will store that into the memory, and it will use the same. If let's suppose 1,000 time is there, only once it will convert that line of code into the intermediate code, and rest 999 times it will use the same from the memory. So time will get saved. Now second thing, let's suppose in a program to find the sum of two numbers, x equal to 10 and y equal to 20. Now two programmer is there. One writes like let's suppose z equal to x plus y, and another programmer writes z equal to x plus y, and let's suppose a equal to x minus y. Now there is no need of function x equal to a equal to x minus y. It means that is the wastage. So just in time compilation, what will be there, it will optimize the code, which is not needed. So it reduces our time, and it is not that all the companies uses the same just in time compilation. Some uses the blend kind of mixture. The earlier approach in this just in time compilation, like Sun Microsystem and the company like Oracle, this uses the just in time compilation. No, it is. Uska last slide, go down, last slide. Last slide, Usman.
Yeah, this is the last slide.
No, ma'am. I think one more slide is there. Yeah, I
Good.
think last you can see there. Yeah, yeah.
This is the
Little
last.
bit above is
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some companies JVM allow a means mixed approach. Means this just in time compilation and the earlier approach. Like you can see there, Sun Microsystem, and other follows only second approach. That is the just in time compilation. Like in Oracle, JVM run by the Oracle. So this was the means little bit summary
Okay.
about the just-in-time compilation.
Okay, thank you, Ankit. Just to summarize, JIT, what it does is, yeah, it just makes sure that conversion of that byte code into relevant machine level language, that conversion will be done during the runtime. Okay, that is a added advantage where it is JVM is running other part of the code as well as doing the conversion parallelly. So it is called as parallel processing. There is something called as multi-threading. Okay, due to which this JIT works in such a way that translation will never be looked up by the programmer. So by the time the program is running, part of the program is running, the other part getting translated. And once it get translated, the translated code is already stored, just like the cache memory. So next time when you want to run the program, the part of the code that was needed to be converted into machine level language, that is already been done. So there is a lot of time saved in doing this. Okay, so this is the advantage of just-in-time compiler. Thank you, Ankit, for that. Okay, as discussed earlier, we will be beginning with exceptions today. In just 5 or 10 minutes, I will be talking about what is an exception, what are the different types of exceptions in just 5 minutes, because I am not interested in theoretical part much. Okay, so let me share the presentation for you and then directly go to the programs. um, okay. So the presentation is visible? It is visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So what is an exception? Exception is, I call in Java terms, as an event. Okay, it's an event which talks about whenever you are running a program, any kind of good event or a bad event. So anything can be called as an exception. So how this exception is different from error? What error does is it abruptly stops the execution of the program. While exception is in Java, it is mainly useful for telling that, look, we have encountered this kind of problem, but I just want to go ahead with the other part of the program. Let me handle this in such a manner that this exception will not abruptly end the program. Okay, for that reason, exception handling is required. So many examples, division by zero error. So just have a look at this kind of output. I think you might have encountered this kind of output. Just have a look at this. If you get this kind of output when you run any program, your program is abruptly ending. It means that you have not handled the exception situation that has occurred. Then how to handle this exception situation? So try putting the things that may encounter a kind of error or exception into something called as try block. Okay, we have something called try, catch, and finally blocks. I think all of you know about it already. Okay, so try block talks about the part of the code which may lead to an error, which may lead to an exception. Okay, for example, this. So I is equal to 5, j is equal to 0. These all will never lead to any kind of exception because they are merely the initializations. They are not at all any exception causing statements. The part of the code or the statements that may lead to error, that may lead to abrupt interruption like this, such kind of codes have to be put in what is called as try block. Okay, just have a look at this. The next slide shows you the change or the modification that I have done. Okay, in the previous example, no try block was there, no catch block was there, no finally was there. Okay, when to use try, when to use catch, when to use finally, all those things we'll discuss ahead. So the part of the code which is causing the exception, only that part I have put in the try block. You can just see this, please, guys. The part of the code that may lead to abrupt interruption, that part of the code I'll put in try block, and the try block should be always followed by catch block in order to have, say, look, this is the error that I have got. Only for that statement it is been required, that catch block is required only for that reason. So catch block talks about what all may be the possibilities that have encountered in the try block. Okay, so that has to be handled. In the current example, in the coming example, I'll show you more than one statements. In the current example, it is having only exactly one statement in the try block, and accordingly for that arithmetic exception is being handled. So I'm putting my own way of displaying the error message. Just have a look at this particular part where output is being shown so nicely. Okay, it is not abruptly ending and the cursor will be pointing here still. It means that next set of statements can be executed without abrupt interruption. That is the advantage of using try and catch. Okay, and then whatever this follows after the catch block, this is called as finally block. Even though it doesn't have any finally keyword available, but it will be taken as finally. So whether or not the try block or the catch block get executed, whether or not, finally is by default getting executed. Okay, so then I have a question for you before I go ahead. What is this try, what is this catch, and what is this finally? I have told you try block contains the statements, the set of statements that are required or that may lead to an error. Okay, so such all statements bundled up inside opening curly brace and closing curly brace, that becomes a try block. So should I put everything in the try block? It is up to you. Okay, if you put everything, it also doesn't pose any kind of problem. If you put only part of the code which may lead to error, then also it is well and good. But for a good programming practice, put those things which may lead to error. Otherwise, don't put that. Okay. Then, does a program possess exactly one catch block, or can it have only one catch block always in the whole of the program? You can have n number of catch blocks, n number of. But one very important thing I will tell you. If you write try, soon after try, if you can write a finally block, then followed by set of catch blocks. Suppose I write try first, then after the try block, I have written one catch one. Okay. Then I cannot write finally and then go for another catch block. You cannot have anybody coming in between the two catch statements. Okay. Finally, either has to be before all these things or it has to be after all the catch blocks. You cannot have anything coming in between the multiple catch blocks. It is similar to your if, else, if, else, if, else, if, else, if, else. Suppose, can you write if, else, if, third again I will write if, else, if you go on writing like this, there is something called as dangling else problem. Okay, so with that else belongs to what if? Doesn't know. Okay, so in order to avoid such kind of things, catch blocks always are bundled together. Nothing else comes between two catch blocks. Okay, so please make sure that whenever you are writing try, catch, finally, either you write finally at the end, or you can write at the beginning, or soon after the try block you can write finally, then have multiple set of catch blocks. Okay, you cannot have anything in between two catch blocks. So the same thing has been told here. For what for try is used, what for catch is used, what for finally is used. Okay. Normally, finally block is used for closing the file, opened files, or flushing the memory. Okay, all those things are being written always inside the finally block. So there are multiple types of exceptions. We call it as unchecked exception, checked exception. So checked exceptions are already checked by the compiler. Like many such examples are there, where I talk about a memory bound error or stack overflow error. All those things, they come under checked exceptions. There is something called null pointer exception, arithmetic exception. All these are unchecked exceptions. As and when you encounter that, you have to handle them. Okay, otherwise there will be abrupt ending of the program. So in order to avoid that abrupt ending of the program, we have something called as exception handling in Java. Okay. So there are multiple other such examples. Here you can just see file opened. Okay, so until the end of the file, you go on reading and printing it. As simple as that. Simple program being done. Okay, simple program. So next, I will be sharing this PPT to you. Okay, I'm just running these slides because this is not important. Again, it is theoretical. Okay, so I am interested in showing you the program rather than going through these theories. Okay, when to use throw, when to use throws. Throw and throws are very different. Throw talks about telling the compiler, look, I am throwing this kind of exception. Explicitly, I am telling at this point, this exception is encountered. Okay, it is explicit telling of what kind of exception happening. Throws tells, I have these many comma separated list of exceptions named. Out of these, any exception may occur. Okay, I'm not sure which exception will occur. So when you are listing or when you are declaring the kind of exception that you may encounter during the running of this program, we use something called as throws. But when I'm specific, what is the exception that is getting thrown, then I use what is called as throw. Throw is for specific, explicit. Throws is for generic exception declaration, and I don't know what exception may encounter. Okay, and throw has exactly at that moment one name of the exception, but throws is associated with comma separated list of exceptions. I'll show you this also when I'm showing the example. Okay, so a few more examples I have listed. So this is the end of the this is the end of the presentation. I'll just go to few of the examples. Okay, you can just see, guys, you have multiple types of exceptions I have told. The broader category of that is user defined exception, and I call it as inbuilt exceptions. Okay, whatever the in the slide just now you have seen many kinds of exceptions. You can just see here null pointer exception. Previously we had something called stack of overflow exception, and there is something called as arithmetic exception you had just seen here. So all these are inbuilt exceptions. They are already available in a class called exception class. Okay, so and this exception class is available as part of the package java.lang. I hope it is clear for you. I hope this is clear for you. I am not touching these inbuilt exceptions, guys. Okay, I'm interested in creating user defined exceptions. That is a point of concern for me, because all my advanced Java programs, they are dependent on creation of your own exception rather than using the already existing exceptions. Okay, of course, already existing exceptions are required, but other than that, how can you create your own exception? That is a point of concern here. Okay, so for that reason, I'm concentrating only on that. Let me just stop sharing for a while, come back to you, and let me ask you. So let us go ahead with some of the user-defined exceptions that are that I have created. I will directly go and open the Eclipse. I have done the programs there only. Okay, you can just see the first program talks about, I have not written the heading here, but the name of the file explicitly tells that what it is doing. Okay, so I just want to read a command line argument. Guys, just have a look at the statement that I'm making. You are supposed to read a command line argument from the user. The command line argument has to be a string. Okay, that string has to be reversed and check both of them. If both of them are equal, then you have to print string is a palindrome. If it is a palindrome, it has to print the string's length and also convert that to uppercase. Okay, I will repeat. Read a string from the command line argument, convert that into its reverse, equivalent reverse, compare both of them. If it is a palindrome, then print the length of the string and also convert that into uppercase letter. The otherwise, what is that otherwise? If the given string is not a palindrome, then it has to throw me an exception, string not palindrome. It has to throw me an exception, string not palindrome. It is a user defined exception, guys. Oh, okay. It is a user defined exception. Now, so for that, I have written args of 0. See, guys, all these things are already available in Java. As we have in C program, we have int argc, char star argv. Similarly, we have something called as string array of arguments that you can give any number of arguments at the command line. Okay, so the args of 0 is written. The reason for that, because you are reading the first ever input that is being given. So if you are interested in reading more than one, args of 1, args of 2, args of 3, so on. Okay, so I have used a string builder instead of string. The reason for that, because string builder has explicit reverse function available. Even the string buffer also has explicit reverse function available. If you use string class, you have to convert that explicitly by writing for loop. Okay, When I have inbuilt function, why should I write again? So for that reason, I have taken string builder, nothing else other than that. Okay. So what I will do next? I think there is a repetition of statement. Sorry for that. So SB1 is having the input argument. What is that input argument? Suppose I have given my name as the input, Indira. Okay. So that goes and sits in SB1. Now this SB1 has to be converted into its reverse and stored in some other variable. That I'm doing it here in the second set of statements. Here what I'm doing, I'm creating one more string builder, and then with reference to string builder 1, I call a function reverse that gets stored in SB2. So now SB1 has the original string, SB2 has the reverse string. So as simple as that. What you have to do, SB dot to string. I have to convert it into string from string builder because equals is available in string class. Only for that reason toString is used here. Okay. Purposely I have taken this example because multiple things are involved in this. Okay. Then if both are equal, then what I am supposed to do? I am simply printing string is a palindrome, and also I am printing the length of the string by calling on this dot length. Then I have something called dot to upper, which is also available explicitly. So that also you can call. Otherwise, just have a look at this. Otherwise, I have throw new string not palindrome exception. So what is this? This is a constructor. This is a constructor of the exception class which I am going to create. Okay. So this is what I was speaking. When I use throw, I am explicitly telling this is the exception that I am calling. And when you are calling the constructor of the class. Guys, when you create your own exception, that exception has to be a class. That exception has to be created as a class. So when you have called this constructor of this exception class, there has to be a class for that, and there has to be some kind of constructor for that. Okay, and there has to be somebody who is managing all these things. Okay, right now you just assume that I have called this particular constructor of the class. So soon after this, we'll just look at this. I have written this try block over here. Why I have written try block here? Because previous to this, all these things doesn't create any kind of error. They don't throw any kind of exception. It will throw exception from this statement. If it is not equal, what I am supposed to do? That is causing me the exception. Okay. So only that part of the code has to be put in the try block. And as soon as the if else is over, I have written immediately the catch block. This catch block talks about what is the kind of exception I am handling. It is just to tell, okay, this is a kind of exception that I am handling. So what is that I have written? The same exception class name with that got instantiated. I have just created an object of that particular class and simply printed got E. Nothing else other than this. Then how about this particular exception constructor? Up to this it is clear. Any doubt here up to this? Any doubt up to this? No. Can I proceed ahead? Yeah.
Excuse me, ma'am.
So, yeah. Yeah, Usman.
Ma'am, ma'am, it's Ankit.
Yeah, Ankit, tell me.
Ma'am, here you have written the try block.
Yeah.
Means the program is that if both means we will make the palindrome, and if both are equal, then that will execute the upper means those three
Yes. If
those
both
three
are
statements.
equal, it will execute. It will tell that it's a palindrome and it will print the length of the string. If it is not a
Okay.
palindrome, it has to throw an exception.
Okay, it is the means you have made this exception.
Yeah,
It is not
yeah,
an
yeah.
inbuilt exception.
No, it is not. It is a user-defined exception. Okay, but I have not yet created this exception. Have I created the class for it? I have not yet created. I have simply called the exception class constructor. Okay, and I have told in the catch block, look, this is the kind of exception I have encountered. I may encounter. Okay, so Then my next task is, can you mute Ankit? Yeah. Okay. So now my next task is what? I need to just create class for it. Guys, please mute it. Usman, mute it. Okay. So my next task is to just have a class created for this. Now, I have to create a new exception class. That new exception class also should be part of which base class? Exception. Exception is a base class for all the categories of exceptions, whatever it is. Okay. So, for this particular class, for this particular constructor that I have called, I will create one more .java file which is which is having exactly one class which talks about this constructor. Okay, so public class string not palindrome exception extends exception. Look at this. What is this doing? It is telling that I am creating my own exception class which is extending what? Which is extending the old exception. So it means what? Whatever new exception class that I am creating, I am putting that also under the same exception class. Nowhere else. Okay. And what is that I am doing? I am simply writing public string to string. This to string is an inbuilt function. I am just overriding it. I am overriding. Okay. In the way I want. And what is that that I need to I need this to string to print? It is returning string string are not, or sorry, string is not a palindrome. It should be written as string is not a palindrome. Okay, so what I'm doing in the second .java file. In the first .java file, I have simply called the constructor of the exception class. I have simply called the constructor of the exception class, nothing else other than that. Then after that, this constructor called has to have a mapping class. This constructor called has to have a mapping class, and that mapping class I am writing it here. And in this, I have created a class with that particular name and trying to tell that extends exception. The reason for this, because I just want to put this under the exception class so that whenever needed, I can call with this particular name. It will be available for me. So in order to make this as a child of exception class, I have to have extends available. Okay, this is inheritance. Now, if I do this particular class, whatever I'm talking, it will be available for me anywhere, anytime, any number of times I can call this. Okay. Many a times you might also have seen there is a writing of something like this. Something like this, and people will write super. Okay, so when I use this kind of writing in any of the exception class, then I mean to tell here that suppose you want to pass in, guys, please pay attention, this is a very important thing that I am telling. Okay, suppose when you are calling this particular constructor, if I pass SB, if I pass SB here, what is the meaning of this SB? SB contains the original string. SB contains the original string. If I want to pass this original string to this particular class, then this particular super writing is required. Okay, when I want to pass some arguments in this, only then that particular constructor writing is required. Guys, this particular kind of example I'll be taking in the next class. Don't get confused right now. Okay, right now I have taken a constructor which is a default constructor which doesn't have any of the parameters. So what I have done, I have simply called the constructor, and in the other class where I'm creating a exception class, there I have simply written public string to string. This string talks about return type. To string talks about put this particular string in place where my constructor object is instantiated. I will repeat. Put this particular statement wherever the object of my constructor class is instantiated. Where this constructor has been instantiated in the catch block. Okay, so accordingly the program runs. Accordingly the program runs. Let me run this. I will just right click on this, go to run as and go to run configurations because I have to give command line argument. I'll go to the arguments and type here say MADAM and let me hit run. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry. It is running the second example. I'm sorry for that. Yeah. Yeah. Let me give now. Run configurations and go to arguments. Change this argument, madam. Okay, you can just see. I hope you are able to see this, please, guys. Let me know. I hope you are able to see this. This particular output, you are able to see.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it is visible. So what it is talking, I have given madam as a string, which is a palindrome, and its length is it has printed and it has converted it into uppercase. Now I will rerun this code. Right click, I will change the command line argument, run configurations, go to arguments, and I'll simply make this as madam1. Okay, and run it. Just have a look at this. Caught followed by string is not a palindrome. This is what I was speaking. Soon after the object instantiation, the class instantiation, wherever the object is called, there, this particular statement has to be printed. String is not a palindrome. Just have a look at it. Caught, colon, followed by whatever returned by the class, exception class, that gets printed there. Are you getting this? Are you getting this?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you are clear about this?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
I will show you one more program so that it will be more convenient for you. Okay, I'll show one more program for you. Okay, so let me take one more very simple example. I talk about something called as furnace. Okay, purposely I have taken two exceptions here. Okay, just have a
Excuse
look
me,
at.
ma'am.
Yeah. Who is speaking?
Ma'am, in the previous, ma'am, I'm Aditi.
Yeah, tell me.
Ma'am, in the previous example, can you show how the program is working when we pass the SB as a parameter to the constructor we have created?
Yeah, that's what I told Aditi. I will take up that in the next class. Okay.
Okay.
Constructor
Okay.
with the parameters, I will show it in the next class. I told it then only. Don't worry.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes,
I'll take immediately next class the same example. Don't worry.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Whether this simple example is clear for you?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. See, I'm going in the increasing order of the complexity. Okay. So that it becomes convenient for you to follow. Only for that reason I have taken like that. Okay. Both these programs I'll be modifying with the parameters in the next class. With the parameters. Okay. Can I go to the next one?
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
The second one talks about, I have purposely taken two exceptions here. Okay. What I'm doing, okay, I just forgot, sorry. I just forgot to tell you throws and throw. Okay, in this example, I will tell you. Now, this example talks about read from the user what is the temperature of the furnace. If the furnace temperature entered is lesser than 500, then it should tell me, throw an exception, furnace is too cold. You have to increase the temperature. Okay. Suppose temperature of the furnace entered is more than 1000, it should tell me, hey look, your furnace temperature is too much hot. You have to reduce the temperature of it. Something like that. Twofold it is. Okay. Once lesser than 500, it should throw me too cold exception. Less greater than 1000, it should throw me too hot exception. Okay. Two things are there. Now, just have a look at main here. This is very important. So I was talking about throw and throws in the previous example. Guys, I'm left out with only 5 minutes. I will try to finish, otherwise you have to join back, guys, because I have to complete this example. Okay, you have to join back immediately if I don't complete it. Am I clear?
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
ma'am.
Okay. So now I was talking about throw and throws in the previous example. So throw talks about explicit throwing of the exception like here, like here. Okay. Always throw is accompanied with new because I'm calling a new exception class constructor. Always. It is telling that you are throwing here explicitly this kind of exception. But have a look at this. And where throws is available, that is also very important. Have a look at this throw statement. I think when I was explaining in the presentation, I just mentioned it. Throws always is comma separated. You can have multiple exception classes mentioned there, but throw has exactly one exception class. This is the major difference that you can see. And throws is associated with always a function, but throw is just like break, continue, something like that. Okay, but throws is always associated with a function. Just have a look at this main function. Soon after the main function has ended its signature, there is encounter of throws. Throws followed by comma separated. Since there are more than one exception classes in the whole of the program, more than one exception classes are there, you need to specify them as a comma separated. In the previous example, you can just see main was not having throws. Reason for that, there is only one exception class available. Whenever there is exactly one exception class available, there is no need of throws. There is no need of throws because you don't have any choice there. But when you have more than one exception, if you don't give this statement, no throws, if you don't give, it will give you an error in the program. Okay, please note down all these things. They are very important points. First point, what I told, whenever you have more than one exceptions, you have to list them and in the throws along with the function in which the exceptions may be called. Okay, here since I have exactly one function, that function is associated with throws followed by comma separated list of exceptions. Okay with this? Can I proceed ahead? Yes?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Yeah. Then I told you I'll be reading from the user, what is the temperature, just to make it simpler. Okay, because I cannot connect my computer to a furnace, read the temperature from there. Okay, this is just for the trial. So I have read it. How do I read it? By using the scanner class. This you might have used in your Java programming. If not used, I will tell you what is the need of the scanner. Scanner is a class which talks about inputting. Scan through. You can input from anywhere. How do I input? Right now I'm inputting from the input device. That's why I write system.in. Okay, everything in Java is a class. Everything in Java has to be instantiated because everything is object oriented. Okay, so I am creating an object of this scanner class. Using the object of scanner, I'll be using all other built-in functions that are required for reading the values. Okay, so this statement creates an object of scanner class to tell the compiler that I will use SC to read from the user from the keyboard. Okay, so what I will do, system.out.println, enter furnace temperature, and actually this also has to be outside the try block because it will not create any kind of exception. So I have put reading of the temperature. Look at the way in which I have read the temperature. Int temp, SC is the object of scanner class, dot next int. Okay, next int will read integer, dot next will read a string, dot next float will read the real number. Okay, many inbuilt functions are there associated with the scanner class. This comes under util package, and that's why I have written import java.util.scanner. Any doubt till now? No doubts?